When it came to the past few years, a lot of anime female protagonists stepped away from the doe-eyed, clumsy, naive type of personalities and actually made for memorable female characters. Not only do we see them being stronger and actually relatable, these female characters are much more human, and that's what we like to see. We get to see this with Mao from the Apothecary Diaries, Toru from Fruits Basket, Yor from Spy X Family, Chisato from Licorice Recoil, and so on. Now I don't often get to see this character mentioned when it comes to great female anime characters. This character is named Miyo from the series called My Happy Marriage. The story begins with Miyo's abusive family, who deems her worthless, but is soon married off to a fearsome and chilly army commander. But the two learn more about each other, and love may have a chance. Together with her powerful husband-to-be, her true self and hidden powers slowly begin to shine. Although the summary does not give the premise of the show any kind of justice, it does a good job at showing the love story between two characters who would have never met if it weren't for their current circumstances. Miyo's story starts out very differently from the usual cheerful and outgoing female protagonist. This isn't no fault of her own, as she was never allowed to act freely due to her lack of powers. In a house that determines a person's worth based on how powerful someone is, not having powers meant Miyo was treated poorly despite being the oldest child. After the death of her mother, her birth father remarried to an awful woman who had never thought to treat Miyo as family. Soon after, the second wife had a daughter, and the focus of the family turned to the younger child. This became very apparent to a young Miyo, and she feared of being abandoned by her only family. Her only friend was named Koji, a childhood friend who wanted to marry her but was forced to marry the younger sister Kaya since she was going to be the one to inherit the estate in the future. Although Miyo was not romantically involved with Koji in any way, she did genuinely like him as a friend, and was able to give Miyo some form of peace when she was being abused by her family. Despite being the oldest daughter, she was treated as a servant and was never really considered part of the family until the marriage talk began. No one really knew who the husband-to-be is, other than his reputation of being cold and distant. Because of his poor reputation, the younger daughter did not want to marry and suggested that Miyo take the fall for an awful marriage. Ignoring the reluctance from Miyo to marry, the family forced her to do this because they didn't want their daughter, Kaya, to suffer. But this meant they can do whatever they want to Miyo, even if it is to throw her away. Even Miyo knew that her family no longer considered her as one of them. She was merely a tool that is meant to be discarded once her use is over, and that their abuse to her over the years can now be hidden away from society's eyes. Her husband-to-be, Kyoka, was not as Miyo expected. Handsome but a little distant, but still kind enough to welcome her into his family. He does his best to accommodate to Miyo's presence, and Miyo does her best to fulfill her role as his future wife. At first, things are awkward as neither of them really knows how it is to live with another person, especially when it is someone you have never met and is now engaged to one another. The concept of love, especially romantic love, is unknown to these two, but somehow as they continue to live with each other, their feelings also grew. However, as we know how life is, good things never last. Miyo's younger sister had bumped into her on the streets, and Miyo was reminded of her abuse as well as the feelings of inadequacy that came with it. Even though her younger sister did not say much during the exchange, it was enough to make Miyo think that she is not good enough for anyone. This causes her to regress back to a version of herself that only experienced unhappiness and depression, causing her to have nightmares to the point she can't get a good night's rest. And so Miyo pulls away from everyone, and her relationship with Kyoka becomes a little bit tense. Even while Miyo is suffering from her mental state, Kyoka never stopped caring for her and did whatever he can to help her. This perseverance let Miyo know that she is no longer alone and that there is someone who loves her. Wanting to reciprocate these feelings, Miyo comes to terms with herself. She comes to understand that she is wanted, loved, and that there will always be someone there waiting for her at home. So she wants to protect the person she loves too. Miyo no longer dwells on the horrible abuse that had happened. She acknowledges the fact that the people who treated her horribly no longer matter, since they can't do anything to her anymore now that she is out of their reach. It wasn't easy because she had truly wanted to be with her family, but in truth, they were no longer a family the moment they deemed her as an object. So Miyo forsakes the darkness created from her time at her old house, and she finds a home, makes a family with Kyoka, along with others who have come into both of their lives. Getting over one's own trauma is not easy. It is always much easier to keep to ourselves about our feelings and darkness because we think that no one can understand these feelings or even want to get in contact with them. Miyo was a prime example of this, and it shows that trauma is very damaging. It takes years and years to recover from, and even when you think you're fully recovered, you never forget what had happened. However, you have triumphed over trauma when it no longer takes over, causing you to stop your tracks. Miyo did not get to this moment with ease, and it took a lot of work. This is not an easy accomplishment, and anyone who has suffered through trauma deserves a helping hand. Before meeting Kyoka, even Miyo was physically and mentally hurt by her own family, but she did not give in to despair, rather she did her very best even at her darkest times. Anyone can just say she could have fought back or she could have left. Miyo could not have done either of these things on her own. During this time period, and her status as a woman without any supernatural power meant that she would not have any way to stand up for herself. And even if she did, it was not going to end well for her. Miyo could have ended up homeless or get beaten up really badly. Having thoughts of fighting back and speaking out against the abuse is easy, but not to act on since Miyo had no other place to go when she would have been kicked out of the estate. There was a time when these people were kind to her and treated her as one of their own even for a few moments. Despite the overwhelming harm that was caused by these people, Miyo latched onto the hope that the good times would come back. Sometimes they do, but there are also times when it won't. The ability to tell when it's over is detrimental to overcoming our trauma. Miyo was able to recognize this, but it still takes time to recover from the pain and suffering. The series, although short, was able to portray the ups and downs of overcoming trauma by making Miyo go through the good, bad, and even worse times until she reached some form of happiness. I thought this made the emotional aspect of the series more realistic and more appealing to watch. We all know that life is not going to be one smooth uphill of a ride, so when characters go through the same torments we do, we are able to relate more to them. Because of this, I think that Miyo from My Happy Marriage is highly unappreciated as a well-written female protagonist who overcame her trauma.